Okay, everyone. So this is the SIG CLI meeting for September 13. And why don't you go ahead and get started, Phil? I know you have some topics on the failing tests and things like that, right?
Yeah. So I still owe the city kind of a proposal around how we can more address going forward uh, reliably keeping all the tests running and issues kind of triage and that sort of stuff. And what I've been thinking is developing like kind of maintainer role where there's a set of responsibilities and possibly a rotation or some way where we can identify a group of individuals responsible for keeping the code and project relatively healthy. That would probably involve something like some sort of build cop rotation. Some that could probably be rolled into an issue triage rotation as well, and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to work on that over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I was also thinking a little bit about it, and basically the main issue we had was that well, initially we had one skill test failing for about 2 weeks, right, until it got fixed. So that topic we covered in the last SIG meeting already, and last week we also had another skill test fail for about 4 to 5 days, something like that, until we noticed and got it fixed. And that was related to a commit that got merged after the code freeze. So given that, we were thinking about having this possibly rotation new role for someone that probably we would take the list of approvers or something like that. I'm not sure what you guys think about it, but the idea would be to have everyone that is a approver on the CLI SIG to be in the list for a rotation, and every week, for example, people would be in charge of at least having an eye in our tests, especially the kubectl skill tests and things like that, and taking action in case of failures or things like that. But anyway, what I was thinking about doing in the next couple of days was to start a new page on our community repository where I would collect all resources that the person in charge of the maintenance rotation would need. So I would start by creating that page and collecting every link for our dashboard and everything we need in terms of tooling to support that role. And I think that would be a start at least. And in the process, I would probably figure out that what we are missing in terms of support tools to support the role of a maintainer, and from that, we could start putting together this kind of a process, something like that. But I don't know what you guys think. We kind of felt the need for that, because of this subsequential test failures we had on skill tests, especially because they were failing, for a long time. So do you guys have any strong opinions about it?
Hello. I think it's a good suggestion. I would like to devote myself to do that kind of skill check, checking kind of regularly routine jobs. I would like to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I said we could start with the approvers, but of course, if anyone else from the SIG would that is not yet an approver would like to get involved, or if eventually people don't have the time to do that, if you are an approver and don't have the time to do that, we can think about something different. But anyway, that would be at least a starting idea to put that together and start a process like that.
One thing I like about the approvers, and they don't necessarily have to be in the rotation, but I think that's a nice starting place, and I do think they need to be available for triage, because in both issues with the broken SKU test, it meant there was not like a readily available group of people who had been approving the code that we could just say like hey, this is broken. Reaching out on SIG CLI mailing list, for instance, and SIG apps didn't really give us anyone that was actively helping us there. So yeah, it would help if when something broke, everyone who'd been approving code could be available to help triage it. Cool, thanks, Fabiano. That sounds awesome. Gathering those resources seems like a critical first step. So important. And thank you, Xia, for offering to join the rotation. I think that serves a dual purpose of both helping with the sustaining engineering of the project and scaling it, as well as growing leadership within the SIG and helping people take on bigger and broader tasks. So thank you. Cool. Anything else on that?
I think so.
All right. I have one item on the agenda here. It's not urgent, but I just want to make sure that everyone in the SIG kind of knows the background. I have two actually. I have another pull request link here, but I'd like to, or rather, after working with Apply a lot and the merge strategies and going through a lot of complexity in order to introduce changes, I kind of took a look at the code and the strategy and architecture and realized it was like a lot more complex than it needed to be, and probably due to it starting out trying to solve a piece of the problem, and then as we add more and more requirements, the original code structure did not lend itself to being extended very well. And so there's a couple things I have in my proposal and in a prototype PR that's linked in the doc. One is we generate a patch right now, and then originally that was made a lot of sense because the strategic merge patch was like kind of like an overlay, and you just kind of take like the changes and send them up, and it's real simple. But that overlay mechanism doesn't address a number of cases, and we've had to extend it and introduce a number of side directives. So, for instance, deleting from lists. Another one is for ordering in lists. Another one is for deleting in primitive lists, which is a different case than map lists. We're running into merge keys need to be changed, but they're static and can't be changed without breaking backwards compatibility because they're implicit, so we need to introduce more directives for having the ability to change merge keys and make them dynamic, and so we can fix them. Each one of these things makes the patch way more complicated because instead of just deleting an item from a list, we're now deleting an item and then creating this side directive that contains an item and then another side directive that contains the order of items in the deleted list. So it's actually much, much simpler just to update the item and do a put. Like build the item you want to build and then send a put request. Then if it fails with an optimistic lock, do the whole thing over again. And
yeah.
So part of my proposal is just say, forget this whole patch building logic. That would allow us to do stuff like, Sam, I know you worked on the diff for a long time, and that was just incredibly complex due to the code structure, and we tried it 2 times. And if we just do a put, like the diff becomes really easy because you just diff the file you're going to put against what's there now and what your local file is and whatever else you want. And also the code structure right now does a couple of 2-way diffs, and it makes it actually pretty hard to do a 3-way diff because there's all these branches within the two-way diff to say, am I doing deletes? Am I doing adds? Am I doing updates? Do I check for conflicts? Do I not check for conflicts? And so there's this combinatorial explosion of like all the ways the code can be executed, and you try and use this one function in very different ways. So the other thing it does is there's a lot more code in the proposal, but most of that code is interfaces, like clean, clear interfaces and structs that define the logic exactly as it's going to work. And it's like a lot of, a lot of 5 and 10 line functions that just do one thing. So this results in a lot more code because that means more functions and documentation. But overall, I think it will allow us to maintain the code a lot better or more easily. So yeah, if anyone's interested in apply, that's there. It also lends itself towards, Joe, like I know that you've had different ideas about what we should be doing instead. And I think all of these cases, all of our goals do involve needing to merge files together or merge multiple configs together. And so this refactoring and restructuring will allow us to actually have a lot more flexibility in how we choose to do that stuff, whether we do it server side or whether we do it client side, whether it's an annotation or whether it's in a field restoring history and all that sort of stuff.
I applaud the idea of keeping it simple. So yeah, so that's really exciting, I think, to try and take a step back and say, can we keep especially when you get these really subtle semantics on the server, it's just a bug farm. And you find yourself being bug for bug compatible over time. Start talking about things like versioning the merge algorithm, which is a good idea, but it smells bad, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that seems like a step in the right direction. I think that there's still the three-way merge issue around sort of like, you have multiple parties all trying to act on the same thing. I think initializers do similar things, right? And we look at pod presets, and you start looking at things like pod presets that actually are going to add containers, right? It's like now we have a whole nother sort of ball of wax in terms of things mucking with the definition. And how do we actually go through ahead and do that in a sustainable way? My gut here is to keep I don't think we understand this problem well enough to actually come up with the one true solution. And so when in doubt, move it to the client because the client's a lot easier in some ways to actually version, deprecate, and ship different versions of. There's places where we can't do that. But I think there's places where we can't. So like for initializers, I think one option here might be to, as much as possible, like let's say that you want to add Istio to a pod, right? You can do that client side, or you can do it server side. If we do it server side, now we're actually really fundamentally mucking with a pod definition. Like Istio it's not a small tweak when Istio gets injected into a pod. This is a lot of tweaking to that thing. And that's going to make the apply hit all sorts of wacky corner cases as you do stuff like that. Are we better off doing something like having an initializer actually, or an admission controller reject a pod if it doesn't have Istio applied? So this means that you're checking and then just say, well, you have to do it client side, and then we can explore what is the right way to actually manage merging this stuff client side. I don't know. I feel like we're rushing to do stuff server side, and it's going to end poorly. But I don't have a lot of data. This is just my gut feel.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. The one thing that I think the server side apply does make easier is the type conversion. So there's a weird edge case now where if you change the version of your object and then try and merge the old version into the new one, that actually doesn't work very well. But yeah, we've lived with that so far, and I agree with what you're saying. Another problem that's related is we maybe the initializers and a lot of stuff do cross-cutting transformations on pods, and applies working with deployments. And so the diff we show users doesn't actually show what the pod's going to look like because
I guess that's true. Yeah. But initializers could, like the pod presets works with pods, but you could also have initializers with deployments also. Initializers are a generic thing.
Initializers are weird. The thing with initializers with deployments is I think they get added at creation time. So if you
Yeah.
update the deployment, does it reinitialize? Like, what does it reinitialize from? If the initializer makes a decision based on the contents of the deployment, and then you change the contents of the deployment, it doesn't reinitialize. I don't understand how all of it works.
And this is the thing, is that there's this whole workflow of like, you want to have this lockstep of, we make a change and then these folks get to vote and tweak it, and then it becomes effect. Like you can imagine that you have a whole workflow for how you actually sort of like make changes and have lots of people tweak it, and you end up with a bunch of layers that get collapsed together, all server side, but we don't actually call out those layers specifically. So we do things like the base and the three-way merge because we don't actually have those things. And so, I mean, I understand how we got here. I'm just like, there's a certain amount of like, you can make a bunch of rational decisions and end up at the end and go like, this is kind of a little crazy. So I think it's worth sort of taking a little bit of a step back on some of this stuff. And so I think moving towards, let's just keep it simple. Let's try and find a way to sort of, you know, have different strategies client side here. That's kind of where I land on this stuff.
Yeah,
because making server APIs is forever, right? Like even if kubeconfig, you know, kubectl stops using the strategic merge patch, right? That code can't get deprecated. I mean, like it's like we're stuck with that for a year or two, right? I mean, it's like
the strategic merge patch code.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my plan is I don't worry about it. I'm just going to stop using it, and if someone else is using it and they need to fix the bugs in it, they can do so.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying. Yeah, but like it's one of those things where somebody's, as a project, you know, we're going to have to own that thing forever, right? Or at least for some definition of forever.
Yeah. So using the things that we know work, like put, I think is because we know we have to support that, and it's very simple how it works. Cool. Yeah. And again, the top level goal is like, just keep what we have now. We can't take away like the workflow we've already given users, but just make it simple to change, simple to maintain, and allow it so that we can involve it into something that makes more sense.
Yeah, and I mean, and technically the optimistic concurrency is going to work most of the time, unless you have some sort of like pathological, like two folks really beating on something, right? I think again, the one thing that worries me is like auto scaling maybe. That's the one place where you might start getting conflicts.
I think if we have a problem with optimistic blocking, our cluster's screwed, because this thing should take less than a second, right? Read the object, do some like 20 milliseconds CPU time, write the object back. If there's an optimistic lock in there consistently, like with exponential back off, like your cluster's just being so slammed, it's probably going to burn to the ground.
That's true. That's true. I was thinking more things like kubectl edit, but that doesn't use patch anyway. Yeah. So
that's different. Yeah. kubectl edit does use patch actually for that reason, because the user might for a minute. But that one could actually be changed to what we're using as well. I think, like if this works well, we could have the patch use the same merge logic instead of doing the patch, use the same merge logic we're using, where you just merge it all locally.
Okay, yeah, you do the patch client side, and then you still do a put.
Exactly.
Right. So you changed these things on this thing. Let's go ahead. We'll extract a patch out of that. We'll grab the latest version, update it, send it. Boom, you're done.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So it's exciting. I like seeing things get simplified.
Yeah, it's important. Cool. Just do a quick update on the release checklist. We're looking pretty good, so we should all pat ourselves on the back. I think there was one test that was broken, but Sean has a fix for it. I'm not sure if it's been released. Sean, do you have an update? I think we can't hear you. Okay, great. Thank you. And then there is one issue that's open. This one actually does need attention. I don't know if we need to take direct action or just say it's fine, but I'll put a link in. If you look at the issues in the milestone, well, actually, you know what? I didn't check the other kubectl milestone. But there's one issue in the Kubernetes milestone that there was a regression introduced, I think, around export. trying to fix a bug with services, but it actually broke services in a different way. And that's been out for a month that we've known about that. Seems like we're not getting any traction on it. I know Tony filed the original PR. So I think we need to either roll back the fix if we can and just live with the bug that we've been living with so far and people have managed to tolerate, or fix the regression that was introduced.
Still related to the release, the one feature we had for 1.8 was kubectl plugins as alpha. So we made it so all pull requests got merged before code freeze, and documentation was actually already reviewed and merged. So we have docs for plugins, and that's it. So plugins is making it on 1.8 as an alpha feature.
Woo!
Yeah, I personally am pretty excited about having documentation for plugins because, you know, actually a good part of the pieces for plugins were there already for quite some time, but, you know, people had to go to the code base to know how to use it. So having docs is pretty exciting.
Is this the type of thing where I could like write a quick plugin on one of my TGIK type of things and like do we have like an idea for like a stupid plugin that would be sort of useful and fun?
We have a couple examples in the code repository. The one example specifically I wrote is a plugin written in Ruby. It's called Aging. So you invoke it as kubectl plugin Aging, and it's going to show kind of graphical you know, charts or something like that related to how old your pods are. So kind of a, you know, bar graph of your pods by age, something like that. But, you know, that's,
okay. Yeah,
just as an example. But actually, you know, in terms of something that will really make use of the power of plugins, I'm working on the set of commands for the service catalog. So that's going to really use.
Yeah, that's a little deep there.
Yeah, that's very deep. And actually, you know, but on the other hand, it's going to really use all features we currently have in the plugins framework. So it's going to be a very nice example. But at the moment, we have the aging example, which is pretty nice already.
Okay, yeah, I'll check it out. Yeah, it might be fun to sort of come up with something stupid that I can maybe knock out in like an hour or 3 and split that over a couple of like sort of live coding things.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, if you wanna possible project ideas, the plan command that we talked about.
Yeah.
The linter that we so desperately need.
Yeah. All right, I'll think about it a little bit. But if you guys have ideas for stuff where it's mostly the plumbing, but does something kind of fun and you know, you can see like, oh, now I can insert my own wacky code here. That might be fun. Yeah. All right. Cool. Very cool. Exciting.
Robert, I have one more item here. This relates kind of back to the first thing that Fabiano was talking about. But one thing we can do tactically that is not a process change to kind of improve our situation regarding test breaks is we could probably get all of our tests in the pre-submit. None of them are like upgrade tests that take a really long time. They're all pretty reasonable. And I think the best strategy for doing this is if we break all of our tests out into their own jobs, so they're not part of the main jobs, we can get a nice long history and track record proving that those have like 0 flakiness, right? And if we can go 2 weeks without a single failure or a month without a single failure, that makes it easier for us to say, why don't we just put these in the pre-submit? They're you know, totally stable. And then if there's like other within the same job today, there might be like other tests that are flaky that aren't ours, right? So today that would prevent these things from being in the pre-submit because there's other tests that we don't own that are flaky. But by bringing them into our own jobs, we just run our stuff so the whole test suite passes all the time. It also gives us a little more control over like side effects from one test impacting another or test jobs timing out. And so then like they're broken for everyone and no one's responsible and everyone's responsible. And so we get to just exercise ownership and accountability for our tests. So that's a project for anyone who wants to take it up. It's kind of fun and brainless activity and pretty straightforward.
Yeah, sounds great. I would like to do that.
All right, I'll assign an issue to you and then show you some examples.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thanks.
So I have two topics here. The first one is still the dynamic resources fetching. I think we had a discussion last time SIG meeting. So I just talk a little background here. Previously, our kube control get -help message, they just prompt some hard-coded resources, which is not a good experience for developers and users. And we should fix them by giving a more accurate resources list. So I have two solutions here. The solution one I have told before is like implement a ring1 factory, a function which fetch the resources list and shortcut from the discovery client and concatenate those information to prompt to the user when user execute the command. But Jordan seems he doesn't like this implementation, and he just gave me another solution. It's kind of like we remove all of those hard-coded resources string in our help messages. And we prompt a message like, if you want to check those, what kind of resources provided by API server, use kube control API resources, which is a new subcommand to tell user you can use that command to check what kind of resources we provided by server. So the implementation of this solution is much more easier, and I just don't have. His suggestions for solution one is like he doesn't want to, when prompt the message, he doesn't want to talk the kube control to talk to the server, but I think the kube control, it will like always talk to server like every 10 minutes, right? If we got the catch, we'll just using the catch instead of have some network transmission. So I'm not sure what his disagree with solution wise, like the implementation is a little ugly or something. I just saw the networking transmission. It's always necessary, but only if we didn't hit the cache. But the cache, no matter what kind of command you use, if you didn't have the cache, you will always have the network transmission and always have to talk to the server. So I'm not have a strong opinion on solution 1 or 2. I just want to take it for you guys to have some suggestions on it, and yeah.
So the solution Jordan suggested, you said that's simpler and easier to implement, right?
Yeah. It's just like remove like OC get in OpenShift OC. We don't have that hard-coded list in OC get or OC describe annotate. We can just prompt user to use another new command to search what kind of resources they want to use.
That sounds reasonable to me. Like one benefit of that is that like, we'd have to do this for delete. Like there's kube control delete, there's kube control get, there's kube control list or whatever. I don't know. There's a number of these things that use the list. So by just updating the help text to say like to look for the resources, do this, it means we don't have to plug that into every command.
So I have some context about this. I think Jordan's point is there may not be a live server that one user exploring the kubectl command. So in this case, if we don't have live server, so kubectl get help should not return an error. So it should have something helpful. So I think that's Jordan's point.
Yeah. My previous implementation is like if cluster is down, it will fall back to a hard-coded resource string which only contain legacy resources, core resources. This is David's suggestion in my initial implementation PR.
Whose suggestion?
David is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think, you know, I really have some concerns about making help anyhow dynamic. And even though we would rely on the cache or anything like that, but you know, it would still be dynamic and it would still try to talk to the server. So I'm not sure. I would say I probably prefer the solution 2, which is much simpler to implement and just mention the other command, because we keep, you know, help not dynamic, static. And the problem with David's suggestion of falling back to a hard-coded version of what you would otherwise, you know, fetch from the server is that we still have to maintain it, right? So the problem is still there. So even though if you fall back to a hard-coded version, you have to maintain it on our code base. So I would say, personally, I prefer solution 2, and it's much simpler, and we just get it out of our way. So, with the other command, I think the command being suggested is kubectl API researches, right? So with that command, we are really sure that what the results you are getting are accurate, right? Because sometimes if you fall back to a hard-coded version, for example, the result could not be completely accurate. And on the last SIG meeting, I think Philip mentioned the idea of using the client resources or something like that, but you still have the problem with kubectl version skew. So anyway, I think solution 2 is better in my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. Sounds great. Yeah, I think solution 2 is good if you guys agree on this. Also, there's still a little problem is like except that help message, hard-coded help message, we also have 2 places which also use hard-coded resources list. There's another 2 function in pkg /kubectl/kubectl.go. There's a 2 function named resources shortcut form 4 and resources analysis. Those 2 functions only affect bash completion, and another command kubectl get resources -- showcan. So that flag showcan is like if the resources have a shortcut, we prefer to use a shortcut instead of the full name. So those 2 functions also use a hard-coded resources list, but I don't think it will have a big impact. So if you guys also want to tweak those lists to a like dynamic or something, I just don't know how to deal with those 2 functions, or we just keep it for.
If it's just in the help text, if it's just a help text thing, then just doing the same thing, delete the help text makes a lot of sense. It's being used like if it's used for bash autocompletion or something more complicated.
Yeah, that is the bash completion. The content need to pass to the Cobra library. Is there a parameter of Cobra library, and we have to pass those resources list to Cobra so it can do the batch completion.
Let's not target. Let's just solve the simplest case first, and like make sure it's clean and looks good, and be aware. Like it's good to have those in your doc. Like, hey, we gotta figure out what we do and want to do about these. But I think just having a clear fixing one problem is a good start. And the other thing you can do, like we can probably do stuff better than we do now. Like one problem we have is when we list the resources, we don't list the versions, but the versions might change based on server preferences. So doing get resources and then printing out like not just deployment, but like apps v1, beta 2 deployment is what get deployment hits is kind of probably useful to users.
Yeah, I agree. We are, I'm personally very happy that we are getting rid of, hard-coded resources one at a time. And something I probably didn't mention, but before code freeze, we got one pull request merged that makes groups like all dynamic based on the discovery client. So that was one more place where we had a hard-coded list of what was part of get. What was part of the all group that you use in kubectl get all, for example, and is now removed. So yeah, I agree. Let's start with the simplest case, and gradually we are removing everything we have hard-coded, which is good.
Okay, cool.
All right, guys, I gotta run and jump on a bus. I'll probably sign back on from the bus if I get there before the meeting ends.
Okay. So my second topic is a question about the kube control cache mechanism. I think I just did a little research on Open API validation and that HTTP cache. I think currently we have two cache mechanism in our kube control. One is for discovery client, another is for the Open API validation cache, which use the HTTP cache. I just think, are we gonna keep all those two mechanisms at the same time for a long term? Because currently the HTTP cache will also coincidentally cache the discovery information. Because we add a trigger in discovery client and the client goal. I don't think it maybe have, it may doesn't have any big, problem with the user because they kind of don't aware that. But are we gonna make it a more clean and accurate manipulation of what kind of thing we want to cache, what kind of thing we don't want to cache? For example, like we can advance those HTTP cache maybe through some HTTP header to tell server what kind of information we want to cache or something. I just thought, can we have a better cache mechanism, maybe a consistency mechanism instead of two mechanisms, and one also have a little effect on another mechanism, which maybe make people a little confused, but it won't be a big effect to user. But yeah, I just had a little, do we have a long-term solution for that?
Yeah, that's a good point. We definitely don't have a solution right now. Yeah, I personally wasn't even aware, but you're completely right that the Open API will actually fetch the discovery resources too. So yeah, I would say one idea is to open one new issue for that, and we tackle that in the long term. It's kind of a technical debt that we could definitely improve. But yeah, I don't think we even have one issue for that yet or anything like that. But someone that you could start to share some ideas and share some discussions with is David. I think he was the one that wrote the cache support initially. So maybe, go ahead and start a new issue as a technical debt and ping him so that you guys can share some ideas.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So I have one topic. So it's about prototyping the declarative application management. So this is a Brian's idea that we are trying to prototyping it, and we plan to put it under Alpha command. So so we can have people like play with it, and in the future we can make changes. So it's basically have a base layer, and people can also have some customized overlay layer. So it can generate a manifest that can pipe to kubectl apply. So you can first generate the base layer and apply it created, and then pipe the overlay layer to apply, and it will update and like inject some config map and labels and secrets, something like that. Yeah, right now I'm working with Jeff Regan on this.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm glad you're following that thread because I saw it but didn't really get involved with. So yeah, nice. Eventually I'll get there and take a look how it's going, but very nice.
Oh, cool, thanks.
All right, I think we are on time already. So anyone has any other topics? Otherwise, we're done.
Not necessarily any topic, but I've been working on and off on PR dealing with kubectl copy. I pasted the link on the chat, but basically, just wanted quick feedback from anyone who either was willing to give feedback or has some experience with this command. So basically, the command right now takes a basically it takes a base path and then a either a file name or destination path, and as it's implemented right now, at least when copying from, say, your local machine to a pod, it ignores the final fragment of the destination path and keeps the original file name from your local machine. So if, say, you do local path to directory foo, and then you specify a remote path on a pod, as for example, /temp/var on the pod, it'll copy it. It'll try to copy it under /temp/foo. At least, I believe at least as it's noted right now. So a small, I guess, proposal I had in mind was to, in order to make it behave more like ls, per Fabiano's suggestion on the PR, is to basically do a kubectl exec beforehand to see if a directory exists, and then basically go from there. So right now the issue is that we don't check at all whether the destination path exists, and so we make various assumptions about that in the command. Basically, if you guys agree, we could probably beforehand do a remote call, see if a folder exists, and then if it does, then if you're trying to copy a directory, copy it underneath the one that already exists on the pod, and then if the directory doesn't exist, then honor the final fragment. So if you're wanting to copy directory foo as directory bar under the temp directory on a pod, do that if bar doesn't already exist. So I just wanted to see if there was any feedback regarding that, any thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, we can probably follow up on the issue, but my initial concern was to introduce new ways of doing things, right? So as much as we can do whatever CP or SCP does, I think the better, because that's what people are already used to do, right? So I didn't check what SCP does in that case, but that was the CP example. But anyway, we can follow up there. But I think the major point is try to not, have new ways of doing things or things like that. Try to rely on, what people already expect to happen based on the tools they already know, right?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So pretty much if you agree, I can go ahead and draft up a better proposal, and then hopefully have just a better way to present the idea, so that we can all follow up afterwards. So, thanks.
Nice.
I just have a idea. Have we did a little research on Docker CP? Is there any similar thing we can learn from it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take a look, see how it works, and my guess right now is that it probably works similarly to how the normal copy command works on your machine. But I'll take a look anyway and include that on a more formal proposal.
All right, that's it then, guys. Thanks a lot for joining, and see you in a couple of weeks again. Bye-bye.